If last week was a gentle wading into familiar territory, tonight's episode was a cannonball straight into the deep end. David Haller has his first official sit-down with the Shadow King himself, Amahl Farouk. And once you unwrap your mind after that encounter, just remember, this is only the second episode of the season. They're just getting started. It's the FX original series, Legion, Chapter 10.
And all the monkeys are in the zoo. Every day you'll meet quite a few.
Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of Legion. So yes, of course there are spoilers ahead, but let's be honest, if you didn't watch the show, you'd have no idea what we were talking about anyway. So, let me start tonight's review off with letting you know the director of tonight's episode, Anna Lily Amirpour. She is an English director and actor. Her first film was A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night and The Bad Batch, and she just warped your minds. So if there is any better example of the need for diversity in film, yeah, women filmmaking, just throwing it down. She's doing the next Marvel movie or X-Men if anybody is smart. Wow, that was an amazing episode. And we're going to start things off with the big reveal and then kind of move on with that. So yeah, let's just jump right into this week's Scene of the Week. Which of course could only be one thing, and that is David's actual sit-down with the Shadow King, with Amahl Farouk, a face-to-face. I mean, yes, it's in their minds, but at this stage of the game, especially since they don't know where Amal's body is, you know, that's pretty much all that you can do. But we get to see Amahl for the first time, and man, just marvelously played. The whole look was menacing. The discussion, the accent was beautiful. The personality was seductive and confident, kind of like, you know, a little Lenny, a little bit of Oliver, you know, multiple blend of personalities in himself. I loved the tapeworm, which of course a perfect moniker for him. And it was great because when we caught those side profile voices, especially as he tilted his head and the hairline sort of receded, everything was all extended forward like this worm just looking to get right in. It was just so beautifully, wonderfully done. But we get to see really a bit more of the honest personality of Farouk. And his view of himself, which is pretty much godlike. And it makes sense. I mean, this is somebody who is so powerful, as he's telling David, with your power, with your strength, you actually create the world around you. It is not, as we were getting from John Hamm's little discussion, who was just sounding wonderful and all of that, about how people see things. This becomes so important. The idea that we do not see things with our eyes. We don't hear things with our ears. We perceive things with our minds. And that is the quintessential aspect, really, of this episode and I think the entire second season. Because what this encounter really does is give us a great example of how these two people, these two gods who can create literal reality. I mean, if you can project somebody's mind somewhere, if you can project the image of what they're seeing in their mind around them, you can basically create everybody's reality. And like I said, and this is what's happening all around David, and it's wonderfully brought up right in this battle between these two personalities. And a battle it becomes. Which is great. I love the line, "Let's dance," because that's how we've sort of seen the interactions between David and Oliver and Lenny beforehand. And now Farouk using that terminology to describe what they do. It's perfect. That's what a battle is. It's a dance. It's a battle of minds. And here it first manifests itself as wrestling, which is so quaint. I think in Farouk's mind is talking, the physical. Because that's really a simple idea of thinking about any type of conflict. As a human in a body, and this is what we're sort of confined to, that's what conflict is. We duke it out, we shoot it out, we cut it out with sword. I mean, however, it's a physical combat. But what the scene starts to evolve is to show is that if you create the world, it can be anything. Physicality is such a base, simple way of perceiving conflict. Because you can create anything, you can go from a wrestler to a swordsman, now you're a bigger fighter. Or I loved when David first popped up, oh yeah, well I can be a tank. Again, it's learning something bigger, but still physical. So what does Farouk do? Smoke. How are you going to shoot smoke? How are you going to fight smoke? And that becomes the battle that I think Farouk is trying to, in a way, convey to David. You know, is he really an enemy at this point? Is he a fellow god? As long as their interaction is about respect, as Farouk plainly points out, I think that's really more of the case. It's how are we perceiving each other. And also puts things out very, I think, nicely about the whole deal with David and the idea of owing. Where Farouk comes from, an honor debt is very binding. And if that is his belief system, you can play into that. Fine, play into that belief, how you are perceiving things, and then we can make a deal. If you owe me and you see owing someone as an actual debt, that's part of your reality, then that becomes something that David can work with, and I think that's part of what Farouk is putting out there. However, Farouk is not necessarily trustworthy, shall we say, but I mean, again, he didn't lie. I mean, even in that opening bit where David is talking to Lenny and Oliver, and he says for the first time, no violence, nobody gets hurt. They never actually agreed. Just sort of stared at him and maybe raised the head a little bit, but not an actual agreement. So if someone's word, and maybe that is the basis of respect for Farouk, their word is important, then I think at that point, once Farouk agreed to no more killing, he can, David can trust that. However, again, coda, terminology is important. Didn't say anything about maiming. Didn't say anything about hurting, wounding, cutting off arms, in case that becomes a thing. We'll get into it in just a second. So again, those are important little points, I think. But once that all wraps up, we get that little extra coda scene with Lenny. And that unto itself just says so much. I mean, we find out that Lenny was, in fact, an actual person inside Clockworks and was killed when Sid and David switched bodies way back in the first episode. We saw when all the death and everything and bodies, destructions there in Clockwork, we saw Lenny's body plastered up against the wall, guts all pulled out and everything. I believe that's what actually happened to the actual Lenny. That David did just meet her in Clockworks, and then Farouk then took her face and inserted it into all of David's old memories. Which is again about the whole smoke thing. Remember when we were smoking and we were talking about it being blue? That never actually happened. That was a false memory put in. Which explains a lot about what Melanie's going on. Again, in just a second. But seeing that there with Lenny, that the fact that there was an actual person and Farouk has basically stolen her identity, has taken her mind, her mental projection of self, her whole personality, and has integrated that into him. Used as a face to use against David when he was stuck in David's body, but now that he is in Oliver's, it's now an extra personality that's off to the side. Which is what David tells Clark there, is that he has different personalities that he is hiding in. So we don't just see Farouk. Farouk can be the person that's in front of that personality, or it can be the projection of Oliver, or it can be the projection of Lenny. So that's how Farouk uses these personalities, but the personalities themselves are still alive inside of him, which is so disturbing. And for a moment now, we actually have a certain level of sympathy for Lenny. Lenny isn't just a face of Farouk. Lenny is also a victim. of Farouk, a stolen personality that is now trapped in the recesses of his mind. Now that idea of stealing personalities, switching personalities, those mental images of oneself, is, I think, the basis of everything that is what is going on with the characters and maybe the worlds, maybe the basis of this infection. And that is, I don't think what everyone is seeing is reality. I mean, it is and it isn't. Because again, it falls back to that John Hamill discussion there about how humans see the world, that we see those mental projections of things. And I think what's going on with everyone is seeing and projecting their own personal viewpoints on the world. I mean, in the sense of, maybe an analogy is better. In the Matrix, when they first go in the Matrix, when Morpheus is first showing Neo the Matrix, and he brings him into the big blank room, and he's talking about what we are seeing is not ourselves. We are not actually here. This is the mental projection of our digital selves. And I think that is what's going on here. Everybody is seeing the world, but it is a twisted version in their mind. It's like an overlay of these perceptions. And even what everybody is seeing isn't who people are. It's their mental projection of themselves. Clark, perfect example of this. If you've noticed, Clark's looking good. That burn is kind of cleaning up. At the end of last season, it was like half his face was melted, his nose was all down. Last week, his nose was all right, still melty face. Now it's like even the burns aren't as bad. His perception of himself is returning back to how he normally sees himself in his mind. Therefore, that's what everybody else is seeing. Another example would be what's going on with Sid and the cat. Remember last episode, we saw some strange interaction between Sid and the cat, trying to mimic what the cat was doing. And here at the end, we find David runs up to the roof, and it appears that Sid's mind is in the cat. But that's not really the case. I think what's happening is she is projecting her image of herself as the cat. She has practiced, she's believed it, she has envisioned the cat, viewed herself as a cat, and has now taken that point where she can basically project her personality into the image of the cat. And that way, kind of switch things, which is why we then see the cat personality in Sid's body. For Sid, she has mentally in her image switched personalities, switched minds in some aspect. But when David asks her to come back, her personality, herself does not jump back into her body. Her body appears where the cat it was. So what David was seeing there is, again, the mental image, the idea of what Sid believed herself to be, the image that she projected in her mind. And that really, I think, examples what exactly is going on between Cary and Kerry. Is it seems, of course, that their powers have switched. That female Cary, who used to go into male Cary, now it's the opposite. Now it's male Cary that's going into female Cary. But that would be an entire switch of powers, which I don't think is within Farouk's ability. Or even necessarily, that's not a mental act. But if they switched personalities, if their impression, if their minds switched bodies. If we have female Cary's mind goes into male Cary's body, and male Cary's mind goes into female Cary's body, and what everybody's seeing is everyone's own mental projection of themselves, then we can see they haven't switched positions in that. Their minds have just switched bodies, and how everybody else is seeing them is now switched. So I think that's going to be the real thing they have to fix. They're not trying to fix a power switch. They're trying to figure out that switching of personalities. And it's the same thing that Farouk does, stealing people's personalities and holding them in their mind. This here is those personalities actually switching bodies. And whatever is going on in the world, whether this be a manifestation of Farouk or this next kind of infection thing, I think this is symptomatic of that. Oh, and another sign that I think that the world around us being perceived is a mental projection more than the actual world. That is those black chick baby slime tracks that keep showing up. Sid found it in the basement last week, just before David popped up naked and wet from his little float take Cerebro session. And then we saw it again today when David walked into his room before he projected to first meet up with Farouk. Saw another one of those black slime trails. So I think these are signs, again, like that sickening idea, that egg of an idea that's being inserted. These are signs that the world that everyone is seeing is more of the mental projection of how they're seeing the world and maybe not the actual world itself. And David's trip beyond the realms of space and time. Also another serious visual treat. Really cool. I love the whole twisting of the body and all the mortations in the pool there. Plus on top, just a real pretty cool light show. I thought that was all very nicely done. We do get to see a clear picture of Sid, who is definitely missing an arm. I have to admit, I missed that last week. I was so caught up with all of the cool little light show stuff, and I just assumed that she's wearing those long black gloves. I mean, even her black dress was kind of drifting into the background from what we were seeing. But F. Drelishak, one of our viewers, did point that out. We had a nice little chat, went back and saw it. Yeah, it did seem to be gone, and definitely we see that. So whatever is going on in the future, is this the result of, again, those kind of mental egg, nasty black chick things going around? Is this result, did she cut her arm off just like the story last week of the guy who cut off his leg? Or is this some aiming perhaps from Farouk or whatever else that was going on? A lot of questions still, but she seemed to get worse. I also didn't notice the black fingertips last time, but her fingers on that hand are all black and nasty. They're kind of like frostbite. Almost. Is that how she lost her arm also? Anyway, just kind of a cool scene. It's great to see the little sweetness and connection and David's desire to find out what exactly is going on. Very straightforward scene otherwise. There's only one little bit that kind of annoyed me about it, and it's understandable. It's a story structure point. It's still early on. We can't say everything. But when David asks, well, if it's not Farouk, who is it? And Sid's response of, that's not important. We just need... I hate that. I hate that when they blow off what's obviously very, very important information. If you tell me who's behind it, it might lighten things up. Yes, and the whole time stream, maybe knowing about it now is going to create other problems that you can't, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, it's just, I understand from a story standpoint, that's a reveal that's going to be down the road. It's still early. I like that David asked the question. I was just kind of annoyed with the way that Sid answered it. But whatever it is certainly not Farouk, that's clear. David bashes his head in out in the desert in a week, so I guess that's something that's going to need to be avoided. And probably because we're going to need another mental power, another god to help David fight. David is not ready for it. He is certainly dead in the future, so I believe that he failed in his attempt to, which is maybe why Sid is telling that he needs to help Farouk, because he's going to need also Farouk's help after that. Farouk will owe him. Therefore, that could be something that could be used, because whoever we're up against, it's, again, a third, I think, another mental god. And Melanie, still in the doldrums, still battling a serious case of depression, and mentally taking drugs. Again, she is smoking the same blue liquid. Is it blue? It's always blue. That never happened. David said at the very beginning of the episode, that never happened. That was a false memory. Therefore, it's not happening to Melanie either. That doesn't exist. That drug is Farouk, I think, getting into her. And that's just a sign. I don't think it's someone else. I think that's Farouk. Which, again, might be... Farouk might be behind the whole switching of personalities and things, and therefore allowing everyone to not really be prepared for whatever this next thing is that comes. Because this does seem to be a sign of his abilities. And that actually makes kind of an interesting idea when we're talking about the whole personality body switch, that Farouk might be the person behind it. Because David does in the very beginning when he's making that deal, okay, I help you get your body back and then I get my friends back. That's kind of a very telling statement right there. It's assuming that everybody is gone, whereas they're not really, apparently, under Farouk's power. But if he is the one that's causing all of this personality switch in order to basically confuse everyone, confuse the search for him, then that might be, again, that might add a whole new layer. So I think that, again, that's still kind of the question. Is Farouk the one behind all of this personality switching, projection, perception? Or is this our mysterious other villain? All right, just a couple of small things. One, the music box in the beginning. I think that was the, I don't know, alarm, the signal that everybody was out there in the middle of the field, and therefore that was the sign for Farouk that he could go into Division 3. I don't know, that would be an interesting kind of cue. But Sid did say that that was a memory from her childhood. We saw that kind of reflection there of a kid looking at the music box, and she didn't like it. But I'm curious about that as well, because Sid has blue eyes in the show, and the kid had brown eyes. So has she switched eye colors? Or is this part of her perception of self, which is why we're seeing it? Loving the voices in David's head, the conversations he's having with himself. I wonder if that is, again, a sign of those separating personalities. Also love how it's done. They're shooting it all in stereo because we could hear the voices seem to come from different places. And I just love that. Our monk that's being searched for, we find out at the end, is hiding down with the rest of the victims of this infection, which does explain that cool sequence when Oliver does go into Division 3, and we get that awesome pan point where it goes from Oliver to Farouk, and then he turns his head and we go back into Oliver. One, that just looks super cool, but two, it's obviously who he was looking for and why he paused there to look in. But I also think that that is the perfect sign that it's not Farouk who is behind this infection, that that is coming from someone else who is locking personalities in maze or stealing personalities themselves. And that's why this is happening. Again, I think they're both working in the same manner. But there wasn't a sign of pride or discovery or anything like that when he looked in. So part of me was wondering if those infected were the other personalities that Farouk has stolen over time, that he is hiding behind. But considering the way that he looked at it and didn't recognize anything that was going on, if he was behind it, I think there would be a sense of pride, and I think he might be more ready to detect the monk, who, again, is also probably projecting the mental image of being a victim. I love the basket vision inside Fukuyama's little basket head there. I don't know, it was simple, it was just cool. I mean, you get a half machine connected to our Vermilion, little GLaDOS speakers. It would make sense how he sees the world. But again, if he is perceiving this same perception, he did see female Cary on the bed. So therefore, he is not as immune to whatever it is that's going on. But is suspecting David here, and I think that might also be the sign. I think ultimately we may find out that Fukuyama is the one behind all of it. I still think he's MODOK. I think that's what we're going to find out. But I know, we'll wait and see. And the song that Cary was singing to help straighten her and other Cary out, the tra-la-la-la-la-la-la, yeah, that is from the Banana Splits. It's a show from the late 60s, produced by Hanna-Barbera, costumes done by Sid and Marty Krofft, who also did Krofft Superstars. Played a lot on repeat on Saturday mornings, and yes, still haunts some of our memories. Yes, and while it does seem a little selfish considering the whole fate of the world at the moment, Melanie's advice does ring certainly true. We all die, the real tragedy is forgetting to live. Good advice, but maybe not quite at the moment. Alright, I think that hits all of the main points. Again, a show like this, we could talk for another hour about everything. But I think we will wrap things up for now. So again, only chapter 2, 8 more episodes to go in the season. So much more to discover, so much of our minds yet to be warped. And I am very much looking forward to it. So thank you so much for joining me with this review. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments, throw those down in the section below. What I miss, what's racking your brains, throw them down. We can keep this conversation going. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. And if you're not a subscriber, click this button and you'll catch all these reviews. Plus Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Westworld 2, Fear the Walking Dead, lots of stuff. And here's a couple other reviews you can check out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.